Hello everyone, my name is Lavender, and for this skin tutorial, I'll try to be as thorough as explaining the process as best as I can. So I am going to show you how I color and shade skin, and how you can do it too. Also a bit of a disclaimer that in the future I will be showing tutorials on how I shade darker skin tones. So without further ado, let's get started. So to start off, I personally recommend establishing a mid-tone for it. Not too light or not too dark, depending on the complexion that you're aiming for. It's just better to start with a middle ground and work your way to lighter and darker shading later on. If you're having trouble figuring out what colors you want to establish, here's an example of the different types of midtones to look into. As I mentioned, it varies depending on what complexion that you want your character to have. Next, you're going to work on both your highlights and your lowlights. Since the midtone has already been established, it helps shadows and highlights stand out better. I start off with highlights first in order to establish a light source on where the light will hit the most. Since I used the sun behind Peach, most of her skin will be in the shadows and very few parts will be in the light. This will also vary depending on the light source you chose. For now, you don't want it to be too light or too dark, with some examples on what colors to hypothetically use. Quick tip, you can also experiment by adding different colors such as blues, pinks, oranges, and so on, which depends on the background as you see me adding here. It helps the skin feel more realistic, though keeping it very subtle. Once you have all the colors added to where you see fit, blend them all and ensure that there's no obvious paint strokes. I recommend doing the shading in a light circular motion so that it all blends evenly. Adjust your brush's configurations as needed. Once that step has been completed, now it's time for the shadows to really stand out. Shadows are a bit iffy since you can easily make them too dark or not dark enough, and this is something that you can experiment with. If you're using multiply, for example, use purples, blues, grays, or even pink. If you're using normal, then just make sure you do not accidentally undo what you did previously. Use multiple layers as you want and adjust the opacity as needed. Now, if you find that your skin is not looking bright or colorful, then feel free to add in colors that are vibrant. You can use one or more colors if you want. Now that we've gotten the basics out of the way, it is now time for the skin to really look like skin. You'll notice that I'm using the lasso tool, where it helps me get sections on where I want the darkest shadows to be without interfering with the rest of the skin color. Do not be scared to go too dark with this, since that's how skin usually tends to be. Now, I can understand that this part can get a little bit confusing since there's many parts where I put color in different areas where I see fit. It's best to experiment and mess around as to where you want the colors to be. This is the best way to get more comfortable at skin shading. Using the lasso tool can help define muscles more and focus on where the skin touches or is against. Doing so will help make certain areas of the skin pop out more, as shown here. As a bit of a bonus, I will also help walk you through how to shade the face, since it's probably the most difficult part. It's just very easy to mess up the shading and accidentally make characters look older, to put it lightly. Where I tend to start is the shading first and then the lighting. It's best to start shading around the eyelids, under the eyes, mouth, forehead, jawline, chin, and the round of nose first. Make sure once again you blend them all evenly. And for reference, the easiest way to shade the face is just go from dark to light, focusing on the shading first and then the lighter colors. A quick rundown on how I color eyes is I first start off with black, and on the same layer, I add the colors going from lightest at the bottom to the darkest at the top, and then evenly blending them all together. After that, I once again go back to black for the pupils, and then add in reflections later on. I cannot stress this enough, it is okay to take parts of your drawing and having to make changes if it doesn't look right for you. Never settle for something that looks off in your eyes, even if it means having to rework areas that you've already put plenty of time in. Even though it is a setback and an inconvenience, it will pay off in the finished product. It's better to catch it on early and fix it as soon as possible. Lips are also very iffy to draw and shade, but rest assured I will also make a tutorial video on how to properly draw and shade lips in the future. After the face, it is time to put in the final shadows and highlights of the skin. Once again, I use the lasso tool to know where these shadows and highlights will be located. This will help give off a more realistic yet glowy effect of the skin. Now moving on to highlights, I personally go with overlay since it's not as bright as shine or dodge, since skin isn't all that bright. However, that shouldn't discourage you into not using those modes. It'll just make the skin a little too bright, and it is something that I had to learn how to balance over time. Skin can be shiny, but not too shiny. Now it is finally time to finish things up. This part can either be the easiest or the hardest part of it all. The more I draw, the longer adding in the finishing touches take, since I'm much more careful and really looking over everything. adding things I forgot, changing colors, fixing certain areas, and so on. I've learned this to take more time in adjusting and fixing imperfections in order to be happy with the final product and not having to worry about posting it and having regrets later on. So, for this part, it's not just adding in highlights and special effects, it's more about fixing everything and making sure it looks its best. Once you've added in your special effects and fixed all that there is needed, you're all done. I hope I was as thorough as possible in explaining everything as best as I could and showcased everything as best as I could. And if you found this helpful, I hope you look forward into my future tutorials. And overall, thank you.